Baba is a Swahili word for father. And so I named my company Baba's Legacy because our work is going to determine what our legacy is going to look like. And we're setting an example for our children and people in our village.
Hello and welcome to another great edition of Beyond the Hype. Yes, I know every episode I say is great, but every episode I deliver. I just ask anybody who watches the show. Listen, that's because I always have some great guests. I'm Alfred Edmonds Jr., Senior Vice President and Executive Editor at Black Enterprise. And this is a really special Beyond the Hype for me because I am very passionate about fatherhood, particularly being a Black father. And our guest today is going to help us jump into that. But if you're joining via YouTube, I want to remind you to subscribe to the Black Enterprise YouTube channel, to like, share, comment. You'll get to see all of our content, not just Beyond the Hype, but all of our shows, all of our content from our events in one place. And it's great content and great information for you. But of course, if you're listening on any other platform, Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, X, wherever you're coming to us from, blackenterprise.com itself, we want to hear your comments, so we encourage you to like and share and really engage with us, whether you're watching it on the premiere date or you're seeing it on demand later on. We want to hear from you. But today, again, we're talking about fatherhood and Black fatherhood in particular. And I want to jump off this conversation before I introduce my guest by talking about a book that, if you've been following me on social media, you know I'm reading. We had the author at our virtual town hall on the economic outlook for African Americans. It's called Black Power Scorecard by Andre M. Perry. You're going to hear me talking more about that book, both on social media and other platforms. But the reason I'm bringing it up for this conversation is Black Power Scorecard is a book about research about what makes Black communities thrive. It doesn't compare Black communities to white communities. It says if you compare Black communities around the country, there are those communities that are thriving and there are those that aren't thriving. And so it breaks out the research by counties, which is a very unique way of approaching the idea of Black progress that's different from us just comparing ourselves to other ethnic groups. One of the key factors that Andre Perry identifies in this book as one of the factors that actually moves the needle of healthy Black communities is Black fathers, the presence of Black fathers. And to be clear, even when Black fathers aren't quote unquote present, meaning they're not in the home, research has already shown that they are still more involved in the lives of their children than quote unquote non-present fathers of other groups, of other communities. That research came out shortly before the pandemic and has been affirmed by other studies that show even when Black fathers aren't in the home, we are still more engaged and involved in the upbringing and the care of our children. But what Andre Perry's book shows is that when Black fathers are present and are engaged, it is a key factor in the economic, health outcomes, longevity outcomes, every positive outcome in Black communities. One of the key factors is the presence of Black fathers. So that's why I was so excited about able to get this person. And let me be transparent. We know each other. We're connected through Rutgers, particularly Rutgers African American Alumni Alliance. We've known each other a long time. I deeply admire and respect this brother. So, I'm always trying to be transparent when I have a guest on who I also consider like a brother to me. He's not the first Rutgers alum that's ever been on the show, but he's on the show because he is celebrated and a wonderful example of not only the impact and the possibilities and the wealth and the blessings that come out of present fathers, but he did it as a single father. And we're going to let him tell his story himself. Please welcome to the show the president and CEO of Baba's Legacy, LLC, William Bill Davis. Listen, Bill, thank you for joining us on Beyond the Hype.
Alfred, it is truly an honor and a privilege, sir. And let me say this publicly. I've been a fan of your work for the several decades that you've been at Black Enterprise. And, Black Enterprise as an entity has been critical to helping all of us improve our literacy, our financial literacy, and things we need to do collectively to move our community forward. And so, bro, going back to the Black voice, when you were at Rutgers, connected to the Black voice. So, your work in this field, man, honors Ida B. Wells and William Monroe Trotter and all the other people who were putting out information to make sure our community could advance, bro. So I'm honored and privileged to have the opportunity to have this conversation with you.
So yeah, so listen, guys. When you hear him say the black voice, you're talking about somebody who knew me when, because that was before I even knew that I was going to end up being a journalist. That was my introduction to what ended up becoming my career. And so I just thank you. And being mentioned in the same name as Ida B. Wells or any of those, for a black journalist, that's just, oh my God, that's just super high praise. So I appreciate it. Let's start by just giving a more detailed introduction from you about who you are and what you do. I mean, I know you're adjunct professor, been at Rutgers, NYU. You're an educator, you're a trainer, you're an author, you're an experienced veteran public speaker. But talk about who Bill Davis is and how you came to be who you came to be.
Well, I was born in Newark, and so fortunately, my father was a veteran of World War II, and so after the war, I was born in Newark. My father was very lucky and actually hit the street number back in the day, and so that's we ended up moving from Newark to Plainfield. So I was raised in Plainfield, and um, ironically, my parents. So we were celebrating the 100th year of Malcolm X's birthday. My mother was about your complexion, and so she really loved Malcolm X. My father was my complexion, and he liked Dr. King. So I was raised in a household. One parent really loved Malcolm, one parent really loved King. And so in 1967, there was rebellion in Plainfield. And so the rebellion in Plainfield was as a consequence of police brutality. So these same issues that we're facing now, we were facing then. And that kind of put me on the path of trying to understand issues pertinent to our community, political, cultural, and those kind of things. And so playing for high school was I was fortunate. A, I had a lot of issues in school. Fortunately, I started running track. My track coaches helped me to pardon the pun, stay on track. But then I had a Black History class when I was in high school. And so all of those things culminated with me, even I didn't really want to go to Rutgers, to end up at Rutgers. And so the Education Opportunity Fund program, which I'm an alumnus
Me
of,
too.
was designed for folks like us whose parents, neither of my parents graduated from high school. And so it's designed for folks like us whose parents were not well educated, not wealthy. So we get to Rutgers. It was a very hostile environment when I got there. So I'm grateful for the Africana Studies Department because that's where I found my solace, found my path. And so people used to ask me, why are you majoring in Africana Studies? And I said, majoring it because it's the path that my soul feels very good with. And so there were a lot of protests at that time. And so there were protests against apartheid in South Africa. There were protests against some of the racist behaviors taking place on campus. And so this issue about our struggle has been long standing. And so I was grateful to be able to, to survive the RU screw, as we termed it at the time. And then ultimately come out, and my first job was to work at Rutgers. And so, it was an interesting journey. And I just accept the fact that, like you, when I got to Rutgers, I knew I had all kind of part-time jobs. I had changed tires, I had painted houses, I had cut grass. And so I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew what I didn't want to
Right.
do. And so when I started, I worked as a student recruiter when I was at Rutgers. And so I went to visit some of the folks that said, we can get you a job at Rutgers. So I did. I started there and I worked there for a period of time, left and went to NYU for a period of time, went to the county college for a period of time. I actually was an EOF counselor on the Rutgers North campus, which was very rewarding to me because the idea of paying it forward, I get to pay it forward now with some of the students who are in certain similar circumstances of my own. And so my, time in higher ed has been incredibly rewarding because I work with young people who are, excuse me, optimistic about their future. The challenge is that there's some who are optimistic but not willing to do the work. And so, so you're faced with youngsters who make great accomplishments and youngsters who choose not to put the effort in. And so, on that journey, I've had a chance to meet and work with some incredibly committed people. Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, I don't know if you had a chance to take a course with him. This brother was a genius, academic scholar warrior who, wrote, they came before Columbus. He got a lot of pushback. Documented Africans came to North America before Europeans did. Ralph Carter, who was, a very dynamic professor, right? So I had a chance to people to pour in and say, listen, you on the right path, bro. Just stay with it. And so, so the work that I do now, um, I work in schools. I've worked in schools all over New Jersey, training school staff how to improve the school climate so the fewest students get suspended and put in special education. And then me and a friend of mine got a grant from the state to go to the schools to work with special ed students in the building and work with their families outside. And so, as a product of public education, I do believe that, while there may be some charter schools that are advantageous for elements of our community, but the majority of our children in public education. And if we cannot help our children do better in school, then we're going to be faced with some enormous challenges outside. And so there's a stat that hopefully people will pay attention to. The majority of the black males who are incarcerated in New Jersey were in special education. And New Jersey has the sad distinction of having the highest proportion of the black males being incarcerated than any other state in the country. It also has the highest wealth gap between blacks and whites in the country. And so while New Jersey is a quasi blue state, there are some aspects of our circumstance that we need to be paying attention to. And so I'm hoping that people are going to vote in this upcoming election for governor. I don't know if I have the bandwidth to say who I'm endorsing, but I'm endorsing the current mayor of Newark, New Jersey, Raz Baraka. So I'm hoping that we will get people to participate in this upcoming election.
Well, listen, I'm as a journalist, I don't endorse anyone publicly, though I do obviously actively vote. But we did have Mayor Baraka on this show maybe a month ago now, because beyond the fact that he's running for governor, he has now, and we said this on the show, established himself as probably the best urban mayor that we've seen. You and I know you're from Newark, that Newark was seen as, even despite having this tradition of black mayors, as kind of, well, there's only so much you can do at Newark. And Ross Baraka
Right.
has proven, no, you can do a lot if you're willing and you're innovative, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm personally not surprised, given what I know about you, that you would be supporting Mayor Baraka for governor. Uh, but there's a couple other things. See, listen, I'm getting kind of emotional because so much of your story is obviously my story. So much of what you did at Rutgers laid the groundwork for what I did when I was an undergrad, and what ended up becoming my career at Black Enterprise. Um, my degree was in art. I didn't know, I majored in art because that's what I was good at, but I didn't know what that meant professionally. Raised by a divorced single mother in a working poor household in a working class community in Long Branch, New Jersey. Almost kind of ended up at Rutgers. I was one mailbox walk to the mailbox away from ending up at Trenton State. I mean, that's
Wow.
how random it was, because I got accepted to Trenton State first, and I was going to the mailbox to acknowledge and mail. Y'all kids don't know what it means when you have to actually mail stuff back. It wasn't going online and pressing a button. I was on my way to mail my acknowledgement and acceptance to Trenton State, and something told me to circle back to my house and check the mailbox. And so you talk about how you're just kind of finding your way, and different people pour into you along the way and encourage you, but you're not coming from a background where that stuff is just kind of automatic. And again, I was an
Right.
EOF student. Um, Ended up not only becoming editor in chief of the Black Voice Carta Boricua when I was an undergrad, which was really my first real start to my career, even though I didn't know that at the time. And I, became chairman of the African Student Congress at the time. So, like I said, trying to get Rutgers the best from the apartheid system in South Africa, and then, of course, the perennial battles. We need more black faculty. We need to protect the
Oh, yeah.
African Studies Department. We need more pathways for black and brown and other economically disadvantaged students to get into the university. I mean, it's so, and just to put a period on it, I mean, Paul Robeson, who my son carries his name. My son's name is David Adam Robeson, the second. I mean, the
Hmm.
first, and then his son is named David Adam Robeson. I had never heard of Paul Robeson, who
Right. Me
who
either.
most people would not argue, would still say he's the greatest graduate ever to graduate from Rutgers University. But I had never heard of him until I got on campus, because at that
Right.
time
Right.
he was basically, was it, I forgot the term, blackballed or whatever you called it. They
He,
do their
he was
best to,
whited out. He
they
was
tried to
whited out, brother.
erase
He
him
was
out of
whited out.
history. They literally,
Yes.
and
Yes.
so it was in the late '70s when finally there was starting to be some, because of the work that you did and the work obviously of post the civil rights movement, particularly student movements at Rutgers, Black student movements at Rutgers, that finally there started to be some acknowledgement by the time I got to campus. So I just say all that to say that it's amazing how when you connect these dots of legacy before us, it informs what you do today and why you do it. It
Mm-hmm.
informs what I do today. Me being at Black Enterprise all this time was perfectly natural, even though it wasn't my career plan, but perfectly natural to what I was exposed to and what became important to me during those undergraduate years at Rutgers, like you said, where it, as a PWI, it definitely wasn't an HBCU. And it's like, how do you thrive at a great
Right.
university, but in often a hostile environment or foreign? You're the foreigner in this hostile environment, and you want to thrive. And of course, the African Student Congress, or the Black Student Congress, or what it was called, the Paul Robeson Cultural Center. The organizations on campus that helped us to band together so that we can excel in that environment and beyond. So, um,
And what's interesting now,
mhm,
Alfred, is the moment that we're in politically,
yes,
in which DEI is under threat, affirmative action is under threat.
yes,
And so for the campuses that have cut DEI programs, that Harvard did not give the funding for the Black students there to have their graduation ceremony. I'm sure you've been to the rites of passage ceremony at Rutgers. It's a ceremony which African American Latin students are the sole focus. All the speakers, African drummers, everything. And so we are under threat. And so the book that Carl Anderson wrote, White Rage,
yes,
in which every time African Americans advanced, then there's a backlash. And so when we look at what happened after the end of the Civil War, we look at what happened during the Jim Crow era, aka apartheid. We've always experienced this. And so our children and grandchildren are going to be faced with having the same kind of fight that we had when we were there.
yes,
And so it's important for us to make sure. I mean, so when I think about my children, I didn't intend for them to go to Rutgers. In fact, one of my sons went to Hampton before he transferred to Rutgers because I wanted them to have the Black college experience because I knew that it would be enrich them.
yes,
And so, fortunately, there have been some steps made that have improved the environment since we were students. And so, the rites of passage is one example of it, which has been around for almost 35 years now. There are students who are current students and alumni to go back for when they have the reunion ceremonies. I mean, um, when they have the fall
So you're talking
gathering,
about
and so
the Rutgers African American Alumni Alliance Hall of Fame dinner that happens every
precisely Hall of
October,
Fame
and,
dinner.
and we
Yes,
honor Black
right.
alumni, and of course I'm close to that because I was a co-founder of the predecessor organization to the Rutgers African American Alumni Alliance. And not to interrupt you, but I kind of wanted to hit on a point you made. I too, none of my children, I let them look at Rutgers. Ultimately, none of my
Right.
children went to Rutgers. Uh, Now, only one went to HBCU. One of my daughters went to Spelman. No, that's not true. One went to Morgan, and one went to Spelman. But for the most part, it was like, if you want to go there, I'm not going to stop you. But it's not like when you're a Black student that had the experiences we had at a PWI, you're not enthusiastic about trying to send your child into that same
Exactly.
environment. But on the flip side, a big motivator for those of us who were part of that predecessor group of alumni who started what eventually became what we know now as the Rutgers African American Alumni Alliance, or the RAAA, was when I got into the workforce. And of course, I worked at Black newspapers when I started, and I ended up at Black magazines, and ended up at Black Enterprise. Of course, you were meeting these people who went to Spelman and Hampton and Howard,
Hmm.
and you realized one of the things that they had wasn't just what they had when they were undergrads. They were part of this huge, powerful alumni network because they're like, no,
Absolutely.
HU and Hampton versus Howard, and I went to Spelman, and oh, you
Hmm.
went to
Hmm.
Spelman? Oh, I can get you that job interview. I can get you that reference for your degree program because we and I'm going to circle this back to the current environment. I understood and we understood then that our experience at PW to be successful at the PWI and come out of Rutgers and be successful in a way didn't mean anything if we couldn't organize ourselves as an alumni to make it less difficult for those who came behind us. You know
Precisely.
and now I can say 30 plus maybe 40 years later, the fact that you and I having this conversation is we're part of a alumni network that says, if you say, hey, Alfred, I got this young man from Jersey City. He comes from a background, he doesn't know much about college. But we can say that's cool, but we already been through that. Let's bring him along and then build this alumni network. So we have this Black alumni network that does kind of what the same thing as the HBCU alumni network does, but in a way, it's even more important. And in this current environment, it's critically important that we have Black alumni who are organized in such a way to be a resource in this environment that we, and certainly you, didn't have. I mean, you were basically on your
Exactly.
own,
Exactly.
except for the people who might have come across your path along the way. So I just want to put a period. I'm so passionate about this idea that if you're a Black person and you went to a PWI, it's no longer acceptable for you to say, man, I got out of there. They ain't gonna never see me again, because your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, your nieces, your nephews, your sons and daughters, they ain't all gonna go to HBCUs.
Right.
We've got to
Right.
be there
Right.
to, and just to kind of put a period on it. I'm not even going to go there. I'm just going to say I was the last thing I was expecting was to Rutgers to name their second Black university president in a row.
That was an incredible happy surprise.
Yes, but would that
That
have
was
happened if there was not an active, visible, engaged Black alumni presence at this PWI? Now, we don't know what it's going to end up being, but I submit that the Rutgers of 25 years ago, we wouldn't have got the first one under consideration, much less
right.
a second one.
Right.
But you know what?
Right.
Now, this
Yeah.
happens to me on the show all
But
the time. I
I,
get passionate about so many things.
I understand, bro. There are things to be passionate about, right? I mean, so we're standing on the
Yes.
shoulders. Whenever I do libation and I'm calling Malcolm and Martin, Frederick and Harriet and all the different people that are ancestors that made ways for us, then it's up to us to figure out when our legacy, which is why I named my company Baba's Legacy. And for those people that don't know, Baba is a Swahili word for father. And so I named my company Baba's Legacy because our work is going to determine what our legacy is going to look like.
Yes.
And we're setting an example for our children and people in our village.
Yes.
And so, connecting, and I really appreciate the information that you shared at the beginning about the work that the brothers doing, about how some Black communities are thriving, others are not, and the role of Black fathers being in the mix and how critical that is. Because ultimately, yes, our role is important. And so, the better that we are engaged with our children, the better that we to build that village around our children, because there's going to be things that we tell our children that they're going to need to get reinforced from someone else and then from their peers. And so, in their peers pouring in, I mean, we're pouring into their peers as well as other parents pouring into our children. And so, it's important to make sure that we're clear about that. And so, we are the link. I ran track, so when I had to make that handoff on the relay, right? This is the leg that we're running now. And so it's crazy to think as parents that our children are still subject to police brutality.
Yes.
Children are still subject to racism and discrimination.
Yes.
And so, so it's important for us to make sure that we're still, engaged. Because if we're not, then we're setting an example. So for some of the Black alumni who've left PWIs that got out, then they're feeling like, listen, I don't want to donate, I don't want to contribute, I don't want to participate because of the beatdown that they took while they were there. And so the Black alumni networks and all the other kind of things that we can bring together will hopefully help them heal from the experience that they had and recognize that there's contributions that still need to be made. And so for Rutgers and any state institution, the intention is that they're supposed to reflect the population of the state. And so since Blacks in New Jersey are 12 to 13% of the population, we should be 12 to 13% of the students enrolled. And so that's what the whole struggle was about, that created EOF, that led to opportunities that we had and others had. And so it's important for us to say now that, the Future Scholars Program, so the other efforts that they're making, because sadly, I'm not going to say sadly, the reality that we face is that Black women graduate college twice the rate of Black men.
Yes.
And so for Black women who are college graduates have a very small pool of Black males to choose from who would be their quote unquote to be evenly yoked, to use the
Yes.
Christian terminology, right? And so Black women are better educated in a lot of instances. Their financial stability is better in a lot of instances. And so as a consequence, the group of women that are best suited to be parents have children less than women who are not. And I'm not trying to make a statement about class, anything like that, but just saying if they're better educated, have financially better resources, they would be in a better position to parent children going forward. And so our work has to be, so the work that I'm doing now with the scholarship that you mentioned, so we started the scholarship fund. We want to make sure that we are identifying particularly some young brothers who need some support to be able to go to college, because then ultimately it's going to be more beneficial to our community. And so, we need the mentor. When the 1960s, 70s, the 80s protests, all this, we didn't realize that we still had to build scaffolds and ladders to help children to be able to accomplish what they need to accomplish. And so I am profoundly grateful that, my children are honoring the legacy that I hope that they would. My son, they have a men's conference, a countywide men's conference. My son was one of the presenters there yesterday. One of my daughters is working with the Black Feminist Fund, which is an international Black women's organization that has received millions of dollars in donation, and they actually provide funding for for resources that Black women organizations need for healthcare, education all over the planet. And so, one of my daughters, was three of my children work in corporate, which is, I never worked in corporate, so it's interesting to see three of my children working in corporate. And so, but they're connected to entities in the corporate realm that are trying to do something constructive in the community. And so, I'm profoundly happy for they are who they are, and that they are accomplishing what they're accomplishing, because when I expected them to be on the honor roll and all the kind of things, and their friends were necessarily be on the honor roll, and so sometimes students will work down to stay with their peer group rather than work up to what we expect from them. But we have to provide some incentives or reinforcements to make sure that they can actually honor their gifts.
Yes.
And so, it used to, man, when I used to hear, this whole idea that if you spoke a certain way, that you were acting white, it was such profound disrespect to our ancestors, bro. I was like, come on, wait a minute. We got some significant ancestors we need to be honoring, and not talking about this craziness that, if we speak powerfully and clearly and articulately, that somehow we are not honoring our own ancestors rather than honoring somebody
Oh,
else.
Bill,
So
man.
I am just really, really grateful, bro, that we've been, able to see our children grow up, see them healthy, to see that next generation happen.
Bill, you
And
just
so,
you,
man,
you just hit on a
it's
couple of
incredible.
things. Our CEO Earl Butch Graves Jr., who is the son of the founder Earl Graves, the late great Earl Graves Sr. We literally, because
But not just but I have my son and I read Earl Graves'
yeah,
book. Why should white guys have all the
yeah,
fun? Oh yeah,
yeah.
bro.
So
Yeah.
but we're literally, as we our 55th anniversary is this August of Black Enterprise, and
Okay.
we've launched our mission hasn't changed, but our brand for this anniversary is about elevating excellence. And our CEO just said what you just said about how we do such disrespect to ourselves and our ancestors when we assume that excelling is not a black thing. When excellence is what
Right.
black people and being excellent is our culture. And you're right. We have to kind of push against these forces, particularly in the minds of our children, that says when you excel, somehow you're not being truly black. When it's absolutely the opposite. The other thing I want to hit on, and I got a lot of friends like you who are track athletes, who are my track career ended in high school. It was good, but I was a pole vaulter for a short time that I was. Only the second
Wow.
black pole vaulter in the history of my high school. Didn't stick with it. And by the way, that was only because we had so many sprinters that they had to try to move us into other. So we don't. Everybody can't run the 100. Everybody can't run the 200. But the thing is, I've always had a deep respect for the idea of relay teams, and of course, that's always been a metaphor for our progress that is about passing the baton to future generations. But one of the things that was once shared with me by a former relay racer, track star, he's like, listen, speed is about personal success. So when you're running the 100 or you're running the 200 when you're doing a sprint and you win, that's a reflection of personal success. He said, but when you run on a
Yes.
relay team, you could be the fastest person in the world, but if you drop the baton, all is lost. See, passing the baton is about the legacy. And people
Yes, it
who
is.
understand what we have to do multi generationally don't think about just their own personal success. Am I the richest? Do I have the biggest house? Do I have the best salary? Do I have the best business? And that's just the individual race, and that's fine. Good, brother, you're fast. But if you can't pass that baton,
Hmm.
it's not legacy, and it's not productive in the long run. And it's funny when I talk to people who ran the relay when they track stars, they almost instinctively understand that in the way that athletes who never did that don't necessarily,
Absolutely.
you know.
And so you may be familiar with the African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone.
Yeah.
If you want to go far, go together.
Yes.
And so when I became a single father, my children were 3, 5, 7, and 9. And so I had to build that village around them. And so, but that was part of our philosophy that we're going to go far together. We're all a reflection of each other. And so, whatever I do, whatever you do, you're counting on me to pay the mortgage, to pay PSE&G, to make sure that we got something to eat, a car that's getting us where we got to go. But then I also realized that, my children can only be as successful as they can be with the support of other folks.
Yes.
And so, the better that we can strengthen each other, the better that we can raise everybody, then clearly our village is going to excel. And so I'm grateful for the fact that so when it was time for sleepovers, that there were parents who sent their daughters to my house to spend the night here with me and my daughters. And so I'm incredibly grateful for the trust that we were able to develop. And so it's important for us to realize, and I know that there are people who try to work in silos as opposed to work collectively, which is not historically in our best interest. As much as I love Malcolm, as much as I love Martin and all the, if they had been out there by themselves rather than the thousands of people that supported them,
Yes.
we would have never accomplished what we did. And so it's important for us to realize that all of us benefit when we work together collectively. And it's in that spirit of us working together collectively we've been able to make the progress that we have. And that we need to reshape how our collective work is going to come together now for the current challenges that we face,
Yes.
right? I mean, so I'm glad that the Target boycott and all the other things that are taking place are happening because it sends a message, right? So we're replicating to some degree what the Montgomery bus boycott
Yes.
did, and so we have to bring economic pressure, and since Black enterprise is an economic instrument, then how do we leverage? I mean, and so when we think about the trillions of dollars that the African American community has, how do we leverage those dollars to accomplish the things that we need to accomplish? We talk about Black Wall Street being destroyed, other Black communities, Rosewood, in which we were self-sufficient, then whites who were jealous of us, destroyed and robbed and took things from us. It's important for us to make sure that we understand that, listen, we are not going to allow those historical tragedies to detract us from what we have to do in this current
Yes.
circumstance. And so those lessons are lessons important for us to make sure that we move forward, because if we don't, we will continue to be overrepresented in incarceration rather than education. And so that's why I am such an advocate for education and what we can do, not just in the classroom, but in the community. And so with Juneteenth about to happen, bro, if there was ever a time for us to be real excited about Juneteenth,
Yes.
with this foolishness in the White House right now, we supposed to be all over,
Yes.
everywhere, celebrating the fact that we survived the craziness that our ancestors went through, and that we gonna fight to make sure that we have what we need for our children and grandchildren going
No
forward.
doubt, no doubt, and that's a perfect segue to, the emotional reason. So there's business reasons why I was like, yeah, I should get Bill on the show. I need good content for Black Enterprise. This would be a good episode for Father's Day. But the emotional reason is your experience, your journey as a father. So you mentioned your 4 children. You talked a little bit about them, but tell us about your fatherhood journey, and what it was like when you started it, how that how you became to be a father, and then go into more detail about your approach to fatherhood that now is celebrated again, not just by Black Enterprise, but I've seen the articles that have been done on you and your experience. Obviously, you've written about it, but talk about, because here's the thing, and one of my good brothers was saying to me yesterday, when we're doing what we're doing, we don't really know what it's going to mean down the road. Like when you're a
Mhm.
19-year-old college student and you decide you're going to do this thing with, against apartheid, or you're going to work for the Black or Latino newspaper, you don't really know what it's going to mean down the road. And I'm sure at the beginning of your journey of fatherhood, while I'm sure you went in with, I want to do a good job at this, Just talk a little bit about what it was like for you then and how you evolved to become the father you are today.
I really appreciate that question, Alfred. I was married for 9 years, and during the course of those 9 years, four of my children were born. I do have a daughter that I did not raise. And so my oldest daughter, her mother married someone else. And so eventually my older daughter came to live with me and explained some of the unhealthy things that happened in my absence. And so I became profoundly appreciative of her explaining to me. I was already keyed into my father journey, but it just reinforced for me the fact that I needed to pay better attention. And so, as all of us, man, there are lessons from our parents that were important in how we were raised. And then there's things that we had to learn on our own about how I might be able to take this parenting experience to the next level. And so, unfortunately, my former wife, was dealing with some issues. And so, as I mentioned, when my children were 3, 5, 7, and 9, I became a single father. And so, and the reason the village becomes is so important to me is because of the fact that there was not a lot of support. There was not there was not a lot of like, all right, so we know you can do this. So, but I was really determined that I was really clear. I had family members who have been incarcerated, and so I'm really clear. And I used to tell one of my friends who's also Rutgers grad that, when I would say my prayers, I was saying my prayers to stay healthy enough that my children had to go to foster care where we're overrepresented, that some children went with this parent or family member, some children went with that family member. I was praying every day to stay healthy enough that I would be able to raise them myself.
Mm,
And then, as with any process that we're going through, the first step is acceptance. So if you're trying to stop smoking or lose weight or whatever it is, you have to accept this reality that you have. And so I was reading books, I was listening to different things to try to learn how to, improve my parenting skills and to be honest with the mistakes that I made. We're going to make mistakes, whether, the things, how could I modify my approach? Because, sometimes your children tune you out. And so then you have to figure out, so there was a time when I had to write one of my daughter's letters because she was didn't want us to talk. And so there are different strategies, and you have to be flexible enough to figure out that ultimately you want your children to be as successful as they can be. And that you have to put your ego in your pocket and figure out how to, make sure that you're doing what's best for them rather than what's best for you. And so, that's what I did. Like, all right, because I'm clear that at the end of the day, the reflection is going to be on me. And I tell my children this: I'm going to build a stage. I'm going to give you every opportunity for you to excel in the best way that you can. When you get to the stage, that's up to you, right? My job is to build the stage, but I'm going to prepare you to be on that stage. But when you get there, you have to be able to excel in the manner that you're capable of excelling. And so, fortunately, they got exposed artistically, athletically, to a variety of different things. And, I don't want there ever to be a circumstance which you're not exposed to what possibilities exist. And, but we have to be consistent about our expectations because sometimes they may not be able to fulfill it. And so then we have to get a tutor. We have to get a tutor. We have to spend more time on certain kind of things. We spend more time on certain kind of things. And then, I established certain type of family traditions. So we had a family tradition when I was raising up of having, Sunday dinner together. That was one of my traditions. That now we have Sunday dinner together, but every day that we can have dinner together, we have dinner together. And then there are two things. So I've been celebrating Kwanzaa for over 40 years. So we have a family Kwanzaa celebration every year. And then what I have, I mean, so many graduations, right? So we had middle school, high school, college, we got graduates all the time. So I have what I call our family and friends gathering. And so, sometime over the summer, we invite people over, and you got to see people, but you got to be able to see them, to interact with them, because talking to them on the phone is one thing, but getting to see them in person is a whole other thing. Get to see that energy, how well they're physically maintaining themselves, and so so those are when we established as a family. These are the dates when we're having these gatherings, and so I want to make sure that everybody who physically can make it. I haven't said he said one of my sons lives in London. He's been in London for the past 3 years. He got promoted to managing director this year, so we're incredibly proud of his journey. And so, so it's hard for him to be present at some of our family gatherings. But I have a daughter who lives in Brooklyn and other children that live in Jersey. When it's time for the family gathering, y'all, let's adjust the schedules as needed so that we can all be together, because it's important to be that the link, the bond that they formed among themselves. So we have a family chat, they have their own sibling chat. And so, I am incredibly grateful for the connection that we've been able to sustain over the course of all these decades, really. And so, it's a proud moment. And so I am, at the risk of a shameless plug,
No
I'm gonna
such thing
show
as a
people
shameless
my book.
plug. Come on, man.
You
Tell them.
know, and so the book is available on Amazon. I hope when it's edited that my link will be put in there. If people want a signed copy, they can certainly reach out to me. I'd be happy to sign and send you one. Um, but I do think that the role of Black men and Black fathers is critical to success in our community. And so, which is why the scholarship is intended this year. So we went from $2,500 in scholarship dollars last year, $7,000 this year. And so I am grateful for the fact that last year we gave 4 young men $2,500 scholarships. This year we're going to give 5 young men $1,000 scholarships and 2 young women. And so we've been able to, through our village and through our network, to find a way to pay it forward so that then it's what Shirley Eiffel spoke recently. And she used this metaphor that I think we should really try to embrace as much as we can. So King, Malcolm, Fannie Lou Hamer, all the different ancestors who were protested in the 50s and 60s, we are the beneficiaries of their work, right? We harvested. We were the harvest, right? So the people who protested, that created EOF, financial aid, those things, we harvested. What are we planting? And so for our children and grandchildren, what are they going to harvest? And so it's important for us to think about the work that we do now. How do we pay it forward so that those opportunities will exist for our families and children and everybody else going forward? And so, which is why I told my children 2 years ago, I said, listen, fortunately, everybody's doing fairly well. We need to start a scholarship fund that will go on into perpetuity. So as long as we are able to find ourselves and others to support it, that we're only the second Black family here to do it. And so I'm like, you know, whatever example can be set from that, let's do that. But by the same token, there are children and families who are going to benefit right now. So financial aid is being reduced. I mean, as they talk about this, this underfunding the Department of Education, trying to dismantle it. Special ed grants go through there. All the Pell grants go through there. So we are faced with a real serious crisis today. And so our work has to meet this crisis that we're facing right now.
Talk to me about, again, I think you kind of put it kindly when you said that you, as a young Black father, um, you know, didn't have a lot of sources of support. But beyond that, we as Black men, and certainly as Black fathers, operate in environments that is not just lack of support, but actually an active environment of hostility to the very idea of
Yes.
us being fathers. We're constantly being told that
Hmm.
we're absent, we're inadequate, we're uncaring, we're deadbeats. We're now, of course, none of this is true anymore among Black fathers than any other fathers. And as I was said earlier, research has shown that even when we are not present in the community, we are still more involved. But the narrative, and we don't even want to talk about things like the Moynihan report and those things that says not only brother are you not a good father, but it's your fault you're not a good father. Let's ignore
Exactly.
centuries of destruction and attack and
Right.
ripping apart of Black
Right.
families that created the both the
Right.
economic and the social environments that we have to overcome in order to thrive. Forget all that. You're just and now you're operating in an environment where you are leaning into, listen, I don't have the best advantages. I don't even necessarily know what I'm doing, but I'm going to defy everything I'm being told, all the stereotypes about what I'm supposed to be. And some of this is
Hmm.
coming from people in our own community are saying, brother, why are you doing that?
Hmm.
You know,
Right.
you're a
Right.
simp. You don't need to be doing all that. Talk to me about as a young father. Because I'm sure we have young fathers, black fathers now who are navigating that from not always necessarily a healthy standpoint. How did you navigate that emotionally, spiritually, psychologically? When a lot of people wouldn't have blamed you if you did say, "Oh, I know that I know you didn't want him to go into foster care, brother, but what can you do? What can you know what I'm saying?"
Well, um, I would say this. I hope that people will, you know, I had a very good education, much of which was focused on Black history. And understanding the fact that the points that you raised about it was our families were, this devastation that our families faced during slavery, when it was illegal for us to be married, when women would be raped, that it was profitable for the slave masters to expand slavery by having our women have children, all that kind of stuff. And so just understanding that history. And so I am profoundly grateful to my mother in particular of introducing me to Malcolm X when I was very young. And so because then that started me on this journey, like, listen, uh, I am not who they think I am, right? And so, and it takes some real strength sometimes to not be who people try to make you out to be.
Yes.
And so, have I been called nigga before? Absolutely. Have I had to whip some ass behind that? Absolutely. And so, but I'm also really clear that, how I conduct myself in my own self perception. And so, I did a lot of reading. I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. I did a lot of praying. And so, but I would also be in community events. And so, and people would see me at community events with my children when they were particularly young. And so I should say all of my children are African names. And at an early age, they had to be able to say what their name was, what it meant, and why they had it. Because you meet people with African names, they don't know what the name means, they don't know how they got it. And so I was really clear that I was swimming upstream the whole time. And so I think that when we're clear about the reality that we face, right? And so as a parent, I'm sure you had this conversation with your children. When you get stopped by the cops, this is how you conduct yourself. And it's crazy in 2025 that we still have to have these conversations. When the cop stops you, right? Make sure you explain that where you have to get your documents from, and that that you are not a threat, right? Keep your hands. I mean, so all of us are still faced with these realities of people trying to perpetuate negative stereotypes about us that are not true. And so when I went to Rutgers, and I have to be honest with you, I didn't want to go. My oldest daughter was born my senior year in high school, and so my parents wanted to get married and all that kind of stuff. I had worked as a janitor, and I'm like, listen, I got to go to college because I do not intend to do this the rest of my life. And so, when I get there, I'm thinking I'm going to meet these really smart people with phenomenal, ideas and language and all that kind of stuff. And I get them, these the same fools I went to high school with. Like, yeah, these are the same ones, right? So y'all can get my degree ready because if this guy's a junior, I know I'm graduating. And so, like, all right. But did I get discriminated against? Absolutely. Was I thought to be this, that, other thing? Absolutely. And so it's like, all right. So deep down within us is this seed of resistance. And so that seed of resistance has what's nourished us all of this time. And so when I do libation, and I am absolutely grateful to do libation, it is a phenomenal opportunity to pay acknowledgement to all these ancestors. Some we know, some we don't, the sacrifices that they made. And so it's like, listen, at some point, all of us are gonna be ancestors. Will our name be called in the libation when we become ancestors? Will we be an honorable ancestor? Will people say this brother was kicking ass while he was here? He honored himself, honored his family, honored his community. And so it's in that spirit. And so I'm hoping after one of the things, man, when you invited me to do this, I hope that there'll be some invitations to go to different places, to work with young men, young women, because my book came out in 2020 when the George Floyd protests were happening all over the country. In fact, in the epilogue, I write that while COVID was rampant, there were thousands of us out protesting the George Floyd murder. And so, so it did not get, the jackass was in the White House. I mean, so there were a lot of different things that kind of impeded my ability to be able to do things with the book that I really hope to do. But I want to engage us in conversations about the Black family. How do we set up mentor programs? How are we going to make sure that we're providing the resources that young Black men need so that they can be more successful. Not at the exclusion of Black women, but if we want our families to be in a healthier space, we have to get more brothers who are going to be have opportunities. I mean, so when the Black family was the strongest was when there were industrial jobs available, right? Manufacturing. So you could have a quote unquote middle class lifestyle if you worked at one of these plants and you can make enough money to be able to buy a house and get a car and all those kind of things. Since that has changed, we've been suffering immensely. And so it's important to me that we figure out a way to help our community rise so that our children have the kind of options that they should have. And if we get the opportunity for them to travel abroad, because then they can see themselves in an international
Yes.
context. So when you mentioned Paul Robeson, people that don't know, this brother was the third Black person to graduate from Rutgers. Phi Beta Kappa, in the 1930s, most popular man in the world because he could speak 17 languages, but then was dishonored because accused of being a communist, the same way that people accused of being a terrorist today. And so we see these cycles in history repeat themselves. But when he was on the world stage and he talked about what it was like when people over the world would gravitate to him, our children will benefit by being outside of the country and not being seen the way that they get seen and treated here. And so New Jersey, ironically, is one of the first states in the country that's going to be majority people of color. It's 48% people of color now. And so soon we will be the majority of people of color in this state. Soon the whole country will be majority people of color. And so understanding who we are, the contributions that we've made, the sacrifices that we've made, that for the Latino community, the Asian community, all the people who benefited from the sacrifices that our ancestors made, they don't really know about it. It's our task to make sure that we inform them about it, whether they're going to align themselves with us or they're going to continue to try to align themselves with people who they perceive are in their economic interests, who ultimately are not in their economic interests. But that's our collective task right now. And so one of my mentors said that we should always try to be on the scene of human history and that our history should always make sure that we go back to the first time that a European slave ship went to Africa.
Yes.
And when we understand that, we understand the role that we have to play now. And so I am just profoundly grateful, bro, that I've had the opportunity to do what I've done, that there's more work that I intend and desire to do. And, congratulations to you, the Black Enterprise, 55 years. You think about how many Black businesses don't make it 5 or 10 years, much less 55. And that we are consumers rather than we are producers. And so how do we, in my class, I used to do a section on financial literacy because so many students would get credit cards when they were there, and then they messed their credit up. So you know, so how do we educate people about listen, get your credit score, set up a monthly budget, understand assets and deficits and all this kind of stuff. So don't rush out and buy a car because it's only going to lose value. I mean, so different lessons, man. And the students were gobbling it up. They would come back like Professor Davis. I didn't know any of this information. That's why we're here,
Yes.
so that you will be better equipped when you leave here to make some contributions in the world with your skill set that you're capable of making.
Listen, you've been so generous with your time, but I do want to make sure you once again tell people how they can follow up with you, um, learn more about Baba's legacy, get your book, contribute to the scholarship fund. What's the best way for the Black Enterprise and the Beyond the Hype audience to continue to follow what you're doing and to support what you're doing?
So my website is www.babaslegacy.com, BABASLEGACY.com. There's links on there to reach me, email, phone number. Phone number is 732-647-8212, 732-647-8212. And, please get a copy of the book. As I mentioned earlier, if you reach out to me, I will certainly sign it and send it back to you. I am available to come and participate I'll be in fact, June 12th, the NAACP in Edison. I'm leading a discussion on most people don't remember that New Jersey was a slave state.
Right, right.
And so New Jersey was the last northern state to end slavery. And so the theme of the meeting is borrowing from Dr. King, where do we go from here? New Jersey, where do we go from here? Slavery, reparations, and the next governor. That's June 12th in Edison. And I'll be speaking at different Juneteenth events. The New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. is having a reparations conversation on June 19th. So this issue of reparations is one that we're the only group that has now received reparations for the horrible stuff that happened to us. And so the wealth gap in New Jersey went from $300,000 before the pandemic to $600,000 now between blacks and whites in New Jersey. It's the largest wealth gap in the country. And so when we talk about why our families are suffering, why our children are facing the problems that we are disproportionately poor. And so while I'm an advocate for individual checks, but I'm more of an advocate for institutional investment. How do we improve the schooling climate? How do we improve healthcare? When COVID hit and many of us died because we suffered from diabetes and other kind of health maladies, then it's up to us to make sure that the institutions in our community help us to improve our health physically, emotionally, and so that we can be able to do those things, our community will begin to thrive more than it has. That's why I'm grateful to have this conversation, and that hopefully we will come back and revisit this. Because Alfred, I'm going to ask this as a question, brother. Can we have a conversation with me and my children so that then, Beyond the Hype can get a chance to meet? So my father was in World War II. He named my children The Crew, which is how the title of the book came about, right? And so I'm always an advocate for people get to hear from the crew themselves, right? Listen, these were the lessons that we were taught. These were the lessons that it took us a long time to learn. But these are the lessons that help us accomplish what we did. So if that's a possibility, Alfred, I would appreciate that immensely,
Well,
man. I would be
everything's
really
possible.
grateful.
I'm trying to think of the most people I ever had on this show in one sitting. But listen, anything's possible. So I'm going to take that back to our team and say, hey,
All right.
here's what my brother Bill suggested, recommended, requested. Let's see where we can platform this idea. Listen, Bill, I am so
Hey, listen,
glad
I'd
you were able
appreciate
to
that.
join me. I definitely want to find time to have you back. Like you said, this is an ongoing discussion. The Beyond the Hype audience always knows, whatever we talk about here is really meant to push the discussion forward outside of this particular platform. It should be happening at family reunions. It should be happening around dinner tables. It should be happening at your college or your high school reunion, wherever we go, wherever the village is meant to keep the conversation going and actually take practical action towards solutions. I mean, you said it, so often we think individual solutions will solve systemic problems. And then we look at individual
Hmm.
success and individual breakthroughs, which should be celebrated. I mean, they're sources of
Yes.
motivation and encouragement. But to your point, we need to have systemic solutions, institutional solutions, because the problems are institutionalized. What was done to us was institutionalized, not individualized.
Yes.
So listen, we could go on and on and on. Thank you again for being my guest for this edition of Beyond the Hype.
My pleasure, Alfred. Keep up the great work, sir.
I promised, I delivered another great edition of Beyond the Hype. I want to remind you to subscribe to Black Enterprise on YouTube. Certainly go to blackenterprise.com so you can check out this edition of Beyond the Hype, as well as other episodes, as well as all of our other great shows by my colleagues at Black Enterprise, The New Norm, Sisters Inc. Boy, I'm missing them. Lights, Camera, Business. Just go to YouTube. You'll be able to see the whole lineup of what we do, as well as live sessions recorded from Black Men Excel, Women of Power, just everything that we do. Just subscribe, share, like, and stay with us. And we will see you on the next edition of Beyond the Hype. Thank you for joining us, and you take care. Check out the video channel on blackenterprise.com to find Beyond the Hype and other shows from Black Enterprise editors, writers, and experts. Be sure to subscribe to Beyond the Hype on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or SoundCloud. And if you like the show us love by leaving a 5-star review and spreading the word. This is Alfred Edmond Jr. with Beyond the Hype for Black Enterprise. Thank you for listening. For more than 5 decades, we've had your back. Beyond the Hype and Black Enterprise have everything you need to elevate your excellence.